Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gilbert Martinez. I am the chapter commissioner for the Rogers Hornsby chapter of SABR. So glad you could join us all today. We're in for a very special treat today. I know most everybody that's on the call. Want to welcome everybody that's here. The two big things we're doing today, we have a visit from one of our chapter members and also a book author, Tim Christ, who has written a book about the Bernie U.S. champion Little League World Series team from 2024. And so we're going to spend some time with him. He's going to share some tidbits about his book, and we'll get a chance to ask him questions as well. And I've been looking forward to this all summer long. This is really well-timed when you consider that the Little League World Series is going on right now, the 2026 edition. And so there are games that are going on. The entire continent of Australia is going up against Canada as we speak. Japan is in an elimination game. Today's sort of a heartbreak Saturday because I think all the games today are elimination games. And Bernie has a team in the Little League World Series as well. Tough loss, but they're still alive. They still have a chance. I think, Tim will give us an update on exactly when they're playing and a little bit of his insight, as far as that's concerned. So what I'd like to do, if you just give me a second here, I'm going to share my screen and then I'm going to put this in the chat as well. But this is just a quick link to the book itself. And I'm going to, let's see, give me just a second here, add it to the chat. Oh, it's a big long link. But if you click on that, I'm going to share my screen so you can see what this looks like on Amazon.com. The name of the book is How Bernie Made History and Played on Their Field of Dreams. So it says here, the book follows the story of the Bernie team to the Little League World Series in 2024. Many people don't realize how high this mountain is to climb. We were the 29th team from Texas to get to Williamsport in 75 years. Texas has only won 2 world championships in 1950 and 1966. Our game against Florida was the most watched Little League U.S. championship game since 2015, with over 4.4 million viewers on both ABC and ESPN Plus. In our book, we use our story to talk about how parents, players, and coaches turn ordinary kids into extraordinary athletes and go compete on a global stage like this by 12-year-olds. It shares many of our statistics. That way, other parents and coaches know what can be achieved. They can measure their kids' and teams' current performance and develop plans for continued improvement. So I've dropped that link in the chat so you can learn more about the book itself. But real treat to have Tim with us here today. So Tim, I'd like to turn it over to you. I've made you co-host, so you should be able to share your screen, and we'll have a question and answers at the end. So why don't we turn it over to Tim here?
Excellent. Thank you, Gilbert. Let me put this in presentation mode here and let me know that you guys can see that.
Yep, can totally see it. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so no, definitely excited to join the chapter. I guess I joined SABR back in January. Haven't been able to make a local San Antonio meeting yet. Have actually been to a Houston meeting, but haven't made the San Antonio meeting yet. So look forward to meeting you guys in person here at some point in the near future. But yeah, really appreciate you guys taking time to just talk through this. And so it was really exciting. And I guess just maybe a brief background on me. So I I played Little League as a kid. I guess my claim to fame for Little League was my Little League coach was a guy named John Peters. So if anybody knows Brenham High School baseball, which is about 2.5 hours north and east of San Antonio, John Peters was the high school phenom that was on. He was the first ever high school pitcher featured on the cover of Sports Illustrated in 1989 with the label Super Kid. So he had grown to he was 6 foot tall, probably weighed 160 pounds by the time he was 12 years old, threw about 70 miles an hour. So when he got into high school, he took our high school to 3 state championships. And so then after he graduated, he went to play. He got got to go play at Texas A&M for a little bit, but then he hurt his arm, and ultimately didn't get to play anymore. But so he ended up turning into my little league coach shortly after his collegiate career was over with, and so it was a whole lot of fun to get to obviously learn from him. And he and I've remained friends to this day. He's actually written a book now as well on the mental health side of baseball. It's called When Life Grabs You by the Baseballs, and what he talks about in that book is the night before the state championship game, he actually tried to kill himself by taking a whole bunch of Advil. And he woke up the next morning, realized that he wasn't dead, went to pitch that game, won that game, and then took the high school to the state championship. But he talks about mental health struggles, and obviously that's a big part of anybody's life. That there are, that is a consistent issue that happens obviously in the country. So definitely would encourage you guys to check that out. But so like I said, I played Little League baseball. I ended up playing golf in high school, played golf in college, got a partial golf scholarship to play at a school in North Carolina, turned professional for a couple of years, and then got into the business world. Got my MBA at night, and then basically turned myself into an entrepreneur. So I went and built a company down in Mexico City. Didn't speak Spanish at the time, but I learned to speak Spanish over the time that I was there. That was a very successful business. We grew it to multi-million dollars in revenue, and then we sold to private equity in 2015. And then I've been helping other companies grow their businesses really ever since. So I approach everything from a very pragmatic mindset, but also from a very strategic and long-term mindset, because it takes a long time to make a lot of this stuff happen. So when my son, and we'll talk about it here in just a second, was really little, I had the lifelong plan for him already planned out, right? It's like I want him to be a really, really good kid. I want him to be a great adult. I want him to be very kind and nice and God fearing, and a great athlete as well. And so we'll talk about kind of what we've done to help him achieve that status. But yeah, as Gilbert said, so the summer 2024 was just a blur. We won 17 games straight going up to Williamsport, and then that game against Florida was the most watched game since 2015. That year as well, what we found out, ESPN was actually filming a documentary. So if you go back, you can Google it. It's on YouTube. It's called ESPN Big Dreams, as a documentary of that same summer. So we had ESPN cameras running around all over the place the whole time. There, the 3 weeks in Williamsport, shooting footage, interviewing the parents, interviewing the kids, and getting obviously enough footage for them to put that documentary together. But so that was a really, really cool thing. So kind of what we'll talk about here in, the 45 minutes or so that we've got is really, we'll talk some about youth athletic development. We'll talk about the life in Williamsport, just kind of give you guys some of the behind the scenes stuff, talk about returning to daily life, and then just talk about, kind of what brought the book about. And then obviously with this being SABR, I sprinkle quite a bit of Texas history, and SABR metrics, both in the book as well as, kind of what we'll talk about today. And please interrupt me at any time. Happy to answer questions. So if anybody's read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, going to Williamsport is literally like going to Narnia. You walk through the closet, and it's like another world. Time stands still. So in one hand, I can tell you that it felt like we were there for a year, and on another hand, it felt like we were there for about 10 minutes. It was the craziest experience. But like I said, the 3 weeks in Williamsport were absolutely just a phenomenal experience for both Caleb and the families, and really the whole team. One of the things that I really love about Little League is, it really obviously comes from both a faith and a community-based aspect. And so what we teach the kids early on is, faith, family, character, community, service, and teamwork. And so all those, really, really important character traits are all embodied within the spirit of Little League, and winning is a distant second. Now, obviously, when we also prepare our kids to be world class athletes, then they're going to win a whole lot more than they're going to lose. But we try to start with this appropriate foundation. And so here's just kind of, so this is Caleb when he was literally like 13 months old, obviously shooting hoops there at probably Great Wolf Lodge, or one of the indoor places that we went. This was him in one of his early Little League seasons. So when he was 3 years old, we got him into Catholic Youth Organization, which does a sports program at all the Catholic parishes around really around the country. But what the cool thing is they do flag football in the fall, they do winter basketball, they do spring t-ball, then they do summer either basketball or soccer or both. And then you can just play that circuit. So with Caleb, we did that circuit for 3 years, and in between that, we would practice all of it. And so we would take I've got a big duffel bag from Academy that we bought, that we put all the sports equipment in, and we would take it to, back then it was MacArthur Park. And we would just say, "Hey, buddy, what do you want to play?" He's like, "Oh, I want to play football." So we'd play football for 20 or 30 minutes. He's like, "I want to go shoot hoops." We'd go shoot hoops for 20 or 30 minutes. So we'd be out there for 3 or 4 hours, but we'd play 5 or 6 or 7 different sports. And so what happened over the course of those 3 years with C's, he became the best player on every single one of his teams just because of the amount of energy and effort that we put in into the development process. And so then as we continue, this Falcons, that was his first ever select baseball team. So we live in Fair Oaks Ranch, just out the northwest side of San Antonio there. Technically, we're zoned for Bernie ISD School District, and we obviously are in Bernie's Little League zone. But so we joined the Fair Oaks Falcons, and I will say when we joined, he was 7, so it was a combined 7-8U squad. I would say he's probably at that time he was probably the ninth or 10th best player on the team. So he was, there was definitely plenty of kids that were better and more skilled at baseball at that point than he was. I told him, I said, "But if we're going to play select, we've got to get to work and we've got to be serious about this." And so we've got to put in quite a bit of effort. And he was like, "Oh yeah, Dad, I'm all in on it." So we started practicing quite a little bit. Well, fast forward a year and a half, and he's now the best player on his select team. And that trajectory has continued. Now he's obviously 13 years old. And so this is him. He was player of the game for one of the tournaments there, and he was probably 11 in that picture. And then this is my favorite picture from Williamsport was him just locked in, getting ready to hit against when we played the Mid Atlantic team there, which was the first game that we played there in Williamsport. But so the question becomes is, how do you take kids from 3 years old to really what I call seriously like world class athlete status by 12? And it's a very consistent focus on what matters, and it's also measuring how good they are at different points in time. And there's a tremendous difference between letting a kid simply go run around outside and play in the street with their friends or whatever, and structured, focused, intentional practice, going to the local batting cage or going to a field and, hitting balls for a couple hours or whatever it is. And so, I will tell you that Caleb probably puts in at least 10 to 20 hours worth of practice on top of his regular team practices every week. And there's probably, I would say, there may be a month and a half a year that we take off, that we don't put in some level of practice. But he probably hits baseballs. I mean, like I said, there may be a week or two a year where he doesn't hit a baseball, but almost every other week, at least sometime during that week, we're hitting baseballs and or doing something else, throwing a football or throwing a baseball or whatever. And so all of that effort has accumulated in. So he was the 11-year-old on this team. So the way that this whole thing came about was I got a phone call from the Justin Newsom, who was the general manager of the team. He called me in November of that year before, and he said, "Hey Tim, we want to try to make this little league run." We'd played little league with Helotes when we lived closer to town, and then like I said, we'd gotten into select ball with Fair Oaks. He said, "We're trying to put together this little league team and make a run for Williamsport. We've got 10 really really good 12-year-old players, but there's not really a bunch of other great players in Bernie. And so, Caleb is probably the next best one that we know of. So would you guys be willing to play?" And so, this wasn't even on our radar. So we said, sure. So we joined the team. So we played Little League all spring. We all got divided up amongst the different teams that they have there in Bernie. Caleb played fantastic. He batted, I think, 595 for the series, the 14 games or so that we played. He pitched really, really well. And so we get to the All-Star tryouts. All the kids come out and try out for All-Stars. There's probably 40 or 50 kids that showed up that wanted to try out, and 12 were chosen. And so Caleb was one of the 12 that was chosen, even though he was a year younger. And so then we took off and we went to the first game, which was there in district, which was in Ingram. And so this is just, I know, Gilbert had read it when he was doing the bio, but Texas had been there, 26 other times before us. And so this is the list on the right-hand side. The crazy thing, though, is Texas has never won the world championship, except for twice back in the 1950s and 1960s. So it's been quite a drought for us to get all the way there. And then you can see I had to add in past 2023 in Needville. Now it was obviously Bernie, and then Lamar out of Houston went last year, and then now Bernie's back there this year as the Southwest champion. But so we went to Ingram, and that was really interesting because obviously you guys will remember Ingram got hit really, really hard by those floods last year, July 4th of 2025. So the fields that we played on in Ingram no longer existed a year later. And then Jim Crane, the owner of the Astros, actually wrote a check for $2.4 million to rebuild those fields here just about a year ago after the floods happened. Unfortunately, now that the floods happen in Ingram again, haven't heard the current status of those fields, but it's possible that they got all torn up all over again here, obviously, within a year of getting rebuilt. But so our team was absolutely just a phenomenally stacked team. So we had 7, 8 kids that were like 5'4" or taller, that weighed 125 pounds or more. All 12 of them were really, really good baseball players. And so normally what you see on a little league team, and you'll see it, if you watch some of the series here, and over the next couple 3 weeks, is you'll have 1 or 2 or 3 really good pitchers per team. You'll have 3 to 6 or 7 decent hitters. You might have 1 or 2 really, really good hitters, but you've got to field a team of 12 because it's a continuous batting order with Little League. And so 12 kids have to bat, and then you can let whoever you want play defense, however it plays out. So Caleb, unfortunately, during the regular season, even with All Stars, they let him play outfield quite a little bit. But once we got to Williamsport, he really didn't get to play defense hardly at all. So he got brought into pitch in the game against Nevada, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But so just to give you a sense of how good our team was in district, we had 3 no-hitter games. So we went 15-0, 11-1 because we walked a couple of kids, and then we went 17-0 in section, which was back in Ingram. We went 17-0, 15-3, 12-0, 18-2. So we run ruled everybody at that step as well. And then we went to state, which was in Abilene, which I talk about in the book. Of course, it was 112 degrees in Abilene. We went 11-0, 13-2, and 16-2. And so we had the single star. I'll just put it down there. The single star shows that those were games that we had 0 walks. We obviously celebrate our pitching if we don't walk anybody. And then, but that state tournament that we went 11-0, that was the first game that actually went all 6 innings. And so all the other games had obviously been run ruled prior to that, and so we closed them out early. Which, when you think about how this double elimination style works, we were scared to death every single pitch, every single game, even though it looks like we just rolled through everybody. I can tell you, we were on the edge of our seats, and for those 2 hours, we didn't breathe because we're like, one slip, and we've all played baseball for a long, long time. We all know that, crazy things happen in baseball, and games that you should win, you lose, and other things happen. So we were on the edge of our seats the whole time until we, finally that last pitch was, caught, or that last out was made. And then we were like, okay, thank God we won. And then we continued to roll. But you can see, obviously, it got a little more once we went to Waco, which was the regional tournament. You can see the scores got tighter, but we still won all 4 of those games as well. And so here we are, and I'll share a couple of pictures. This was us, obviously the district champions there in Ingram, after that 17-0 win game. And this is the boys just in Waco, just having fun. I would say too, like, it's funny, and obviously for all you guys that have kids or grandkids, you recognize, like, 12-year-olds are a really interesting breed, right? They can be, all of our kids are fantastic baseball players, and they all act very, very mature on the baseball field. As soon as you get them off the baseball field, they are 12-year-old kids, and they would just as soon go play tag or wiffle ball or be silly or, tell jokes or whatever. And so, they're really right there in the middle of starting to grow up. Right. So, it's a really, it's a really fun and entertaining age. This was a picture that they made of us, for the boys after we won the state tournament there in Abilene. And then this was just the bracket, the picture up on the top right. There's a challenger game that happens in both Waco and in Williamsport. So they bring a bunch of special needs kids, and they basically play a mock game. The regular players that are all there get to basically help all the special needs kids. So Caleb got to push a kid around on a wheelchair. It's just obviously a fun tournament. It's a service related event. And so again, trying to teach our kids, character and service and all those important things. This is a really, really nice thing that we like a lot, that the obviously the Little League does at both state, or both regionals, and Williamsport. And I can tell you, the only game through the U.S. Championship game that we ever were losing in was this game here against Louisiana. When we played them the second time, they scored 3 runs in the second inning, so it was 3-0. The 4th inning came and went, and we scored 6 runs in the 4th inning, and then we went on to win that game. But so one game out of the first, 11, we were ever losing. So again, it just shows the the dominance of our team. So this was the early picture when the boys went to Williamsport. So we got sat down, it was a Tuesday night when we won in Waco, and they're like, congratulations. And this is at like 9 o'clock at night. They're like, congratulations on your win. Your boys are on an airplane Friday morning going to Williamsport. And by the way, you should get on your phones right now, literally while we're talking to you, and and try to find a place to stay because all the hotels book out really, really quickly up there. So here we are trying to like search on our phones frantically for lodging at the same time, listen to all the stuff that they're trying to tell us. And so we pack up, we drive back home late that evening. We get back to Bernie, past midnight on Wednesday morning at that point. And then we met at the HEB in Fair Oaks Friday morning at 1:30 a.m. For there was a police escort to take the boys and the coaches to the airport for their 5 a.m. flight to Newark. And so the San Antonio news media was there at the airport to interview the kids. It was just a crazy whirlwind few days of getting them shuffled off. Well, they get up there on Friday, midday. The first game they don't play until the following Thursday. So in that interim period of time, they do all of their ESPN interviews. They get all new, outfits and gear. So Adidas outfits them from head to toe. Rawlings gives them new gloves. Easton gives them new bats and sliding mitts. Bruce Bolt shipped a bunch of batting gloves up for them. And so the kids just get to act like big leaguers because they're given all this, all this free stuff. And so they're all just on cloud nine. Plus the other 19 teams that are arriving in Williamsport all arrive in those first couple of days. And so you've got 240 kids that all live in this compound behind a high fence that basically they have the run of the entire place. So they're living their best life for three weeks, basically, what I'll call minimal adult supervision, but they just get to go play whenever they want. There's an outside sports court where they can play wiffle ball, they can shoot hoops. There's an inside ping pong tables. There's pinball machines. There's MLB The Show on a couple of big screen TVs that they can play, and so the kids just get to hang out. They feed them all there in the cafeteria that's there in the compound, and so the kids are just really, really, really well taken care of for 3 weeks while they're there in Williamsport. And then you can see there just the back left. That's Caleb in number 4 there. He wears prescription glasses, so he had prescription Oakleys. That's why they're all tinted, but. That was our team. Here was a roster. Like I said, we were very, very fortunate to have some really, really stud baseball players and some bigger kids. So we had 5 kids that could throw 70 miles an hour or faster. Which when you look at what the tournaments you've seen so far, there's generally 1 or 2 kids per team that throw 70 plus. We had 5. And it was just crazy. So here's just a couple of pictures. So this is Lamade Stadium there in Williamsport. So there's Lamade Stadium, which is where all the U.S. games are played, and there's Volunteer Stadium, which is right next to it, which is where all the international games are played. And then once they finally determine a winner for the U.S. side and then determine a winner for the international side, those 2 teams will then play each other for the World Championship. The picture on the bottom right is obviously just our boys celebrating. It looks like Caden's home run there. And then this is Julian on the mound pitching to the Mid-Atlantic team early on. This is the one and only picture you guys will see of us. Interesting thing about there in the stands was Julie Foudy, which was the women's soccer captain, from several years ago and was formerly an ESPN announcer. She's running up and down the stands the whole time. So, Julian would get a strikeout or he'd hit a ball into the outfield or whatever. She'd run over and talk to the hearse, hey, and she'd have the whole questionnaire that they have everybody fill out. So they've got a bunch of information about the kids and the family. And so she'd run over to the hearse and say, hey, tell us about, Julian's, background and growing up and what does he love most. And, then, Caden would, hit a home run or whatever. They'd run over to the Guffies and they'd ask him some questions. So you're seeing me kind of look away from the camera, but there's literally an ESPN camera right there, like 3 feet from me, just staring us right in the face as we're trying to pay attention to these games. So it's a very nerve wracking experience from the adults' perspective as well. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to flip through that quickly. This is just, so there's, this is obviously just another picture of one of the games there at Williamsport. The Sandlot kid came out to throw one of the early pitches. So there's so many celebrities that come and go in this thing, and Little League is such a community event. So when we were in Waco, Jim Martin, who threw the first no-hitter in like 1955, still comes to all the games in Waco every year, signs autographs, and he's like 92 years old now. But it's just one of those things where a lot of these folks that are lifetime Little League folks, they never don't come anymore. That's just it's a blessing and an honor for them to get to still be a part of the game. I don't know why I don't like my mouse here. Um, so what happens and what you guys will see here, and even the tournament this year is on Sunday is the MLB Classic game. So what'll happen is two of the teams will get bussed out to the local Williamsport airport. They'll meet the teams as they come off their private planes. They'll ride the buses back with them. So we had the year we were there in 2024. It was the Detroit Tigers and the New York Yankees. So Caleb and Southwest team rode back with the Tigers. So Caleb actually sat next to Parker Meadows, who's their center fielder, and then the Mountain team met the Yankees, which that was when obviously Aaron Judge is still on the team, but um, uh, Juan was on the team at that point too. And so what happens is they all come back to the stadium. There's games going on during that Sunday, and so the MLB players will sit in the stands with the kids. They'll all hang out. Everybody will sign a whole bunch of autographs, and the kids are mobbed by thousands of other kids that all show up for these games, asking them for autographs and pictures the whole time while they're there. And so they, like I said, they really do feel like big leaguers the whole time. You'll see the big leaguers go out on the field and congratulate the kids after some of the games. They'll get to go in the compound and play ping pong with the boys as well. They'll get to go in the dugouts, and so the kids just get to hang out with their idols literally the entire day. And then what'll happen is the MLB guys will get shuttled off to the field there in Williamsport, Bowman, which is the Williamsport Crosscutters. It's a minor league stadium, and then they'll play a game that evening. And of course, since it's a minor league stadium, all the seats are super close. You get great views of everything, and I think there's 3,000 people can fit in those stands, and so there's not a whole lot of outside tickets get sold, because once you basically accommodate all of the kids and all of the families, there's probably another, 400 or 500 seats that are available for the general public to come watch that game. But we got to watch that game, and actually that game went to extra innings. So here it is, Sunday night, 11 o'clock at night, they finally finish that game. The boys get bused back to the compound, and then they get to go to bed, and then they've got to wake up the next day, and because they've got to play baseball. But here we are, a week and a half into school, and they are not worried about school in the least, because here they are in Williamsport living their best lives. Aaron Judge went up. He has his family there. Obviously, he's adopted, but he went up in the press box and did an interview there for a while at Lombardi Stadium. And this is just dugouts, obviously the mascot there, and so just a few pictures of the boys enjoying the game. That's JJ Feliciano, the picture on the top left. He was the star pitcher for the Florida team. And so you can just see too, I always say, I talk about in the book too, there's not a blade of grass out of place, and that Kentucky bluegrass is just lush and crisp and pure and perfect. You know, middle western Pennsylvania gets plenty of rain, and so the conditions are just absolutely primo. So they've got these perfectly striped fields that are just, like I said, just perfectly mown, and then the orange clay is just perfectly compacted, and so it really is baseball heaven. And then there on the bottom right, you can see that what they call the hill behind the stadium. So that's where the kids will slide down on cardboard boxes. If you've watched any of the tournament this year, because they had a whole bunch of rain a couple of days ago, it's now basically a muddy hill. But the kids will slide down on the mud all day long, and they'll just get muddy as all get out, and they just have a blast. So Mickey Mouse shows up over there. I mean, it's just a whole different world of celebrities just nonstop. This is one of the cool things really too about Little League is MLB doesn't do it anymore, but the players all shake hands after the game, win or lose. It always happens. This is us getting consoled by the Venezuela team after we lost that consolation game on that Sunday. And obviously I was congratulating them on their win as well. And so you've got to read this backwards. So we first got to Williamsport, like I said, on that Friday morning. That Thursday is the first game we played, which was against Mid-Atlantic. It was a local Council Rock, Pennsylvania team. We beat them 9-0. Then we played Florida, like I said, on that Monday after the MLB Classic game, and we beat Florida 4-1. So we sent Florida to the losers bracket. That let us play Wednesday against Mountain. And so we beat Mountain 5-2, and that game is the one that they brought Caleb in to pitch. So he got his first ever Little League World Series strikeout in that game. It was a whole lot of fun. And then when we beat Mountain on that Wednesday, that took us to the U.S. Championship game, which was a rematch against Florida. So Florida played their way back through the losers bracket and then met us for the U.S. Championship game on that Saturday afternoon. We were leading that whole game up through the end of the fifth inning, and then Florida scores 5 runs in the top of the sixth, and we were the home team. We didn't answer, and so Florida walks away with it. Every game up to that game would have been a double elimination game, but that U.S. championship game is a single elimination game. So that was the first loss for us for the entire summer. So we went 17 straight wins. We lost the U.S. championship game 10-7, which ultimately then kicked us to the losers, or to, to the consolation game on Sunday, which was against Venezuela. And so Florida plays Asia Pacific for the world championship game. Florida wins that game 2-1, and they take the championship back home to Florida. What's crazy to think about, and you look at the scores of these games, you see how few runs we gave up in any of the games. And I think our overall runs, and we've got it on the backslide there, is like, it was like 195 to 34. But so we gave up, 2 or fewer runs all the games up leading to that. And then somehow, probably the other best team in the tournament somehow scores 10 runs against us in that day. So again, we talk about anything can happen in baseball. This was one of those days anything happened in baseball. And I say too, I mean, Florida was due. Florida had been to the Little League World Series 23 times. They had been to the U.S. Championship game 8 times, and they had never secured a victory. So Lake Mary was finally able to make it happen for them in 2024. So obviously we applaud their effort, and they played their butt off that day. And then I kind of tweaked the coaches a little bit for this. So obviously that Saturday night, it's just a bunch of tears, and everybody's just decimated. It's been such a crazy summer. Everybody's been living on a high, and it's been just a, emotion packed time. Everybody crashes. Everybody's, so sad because now it's not, we don't even get an if game. It's a consolation game, and then we all go home. But we console the kids that Saturday night. They're all crying. We send them to bed. They've got to wake up the next morning at 10 a.m. and play Venezuela. Well, as you can imagine, emotionally, they're wrecked. The coaches didn't even get him up early that morning to feed him breakfast. So Caleb calls me that morning and says, "Hey, Dad, we haven't eaten." So we rush over to a local diner there in Williamsport, grab him 3 breakfast sandwiches that they've made up for us real quick, run over to the fields, give him those so he can wolf those down. So at least he's got something in his system. Because, again, these are 12-year-old kids. Trying to play baseball for 2 hours on an empty stomach, like, is not something that you can expect a 12-year-old to actually do and do well. So we kind of give him a hard time for that. But obviously, like I said, in the moment, totally makes sense. Like I said, everybody just came off of such an emotional game, and we weren't there to play for the consolation game, and so we unfortunately dropped that as well on that Sunday. And so that was a Sunday morning game. We actually flew home Sunday night. Betty and I did. Monday, the boys flew back home. They fly into San Antonio. The San Antonio firefighters have two fire trucks out there doing a shower of affection over the airplane as it taxis into the tarmac. And the Delta pilot comes on. He's like, "That's the coolest thing I've seen in 35 years of flying." He'd never experienced that before. And so the boys, there's a, a police escort again meets the kids at the airport, buses them all out to Bernie, and there's a parade set up in Bernie where there's thousands of people lining the street. Everybody congregates there at Main Plaza. The mayor Bernie comes out, a bunch of the other city officials come out, say a few words of, congratulations and way to represent the city and the county and Texas well, and we're so proud of you guys. The kids are signing a ton of autographs, taking a bunch of pictures with everybody. And then Tuesday, we take the kids back to school that morning, and they've got the band members and the varsity football team or varsity baseball team for the high schools are meet all the kids at the 3 different middle schools there in Bernie, and they parade them down the halls. So all the other kids line all the halls. They're clapping and cheering. They'd actually shut down school while the games were going on, and broadcast the games in the cafeteria on the big screen TV, so that way the kids in school could watch the boys play. And so everybody knew what was going on, and everybody was kept abreast of what was happening. But the whole town just turned out for Bernie. It was a crazy, wonderful experience. We had as part of our fundraising efforts, we went to a local Republican Party meeting. So Ted Cruz was there. You can see we got, a team photo with him, raised a few $1,000s there at that event to help cover the expenses. And so I got to tell you, to get everybody there for the entire summer, because you think about, I mean, Ingram, thankfully you can drive in, drive out. So it's really not a whole lot of cost other than a little bit of gas and food. But Abilene, we were there for a week. Waco, we were there for a week. And then Williamsport, you're there for 3 weeks. So it ends up being about 15 grand a family by the time this whole thing is said and done. it cost us almost nothing out of pocket because of the generosity of the Bernie and San Antonio community with all the fundraising that happened, and then all the donations that we were given. So incredibly grateful for the community, the way they turned out to support the kids. And then this was just the Williamsport bracket. That we kind of talked about, obviously all the games. So Southwest or Southeast ends up winning that U.S. Championship game. They beat Asia Pacific the next day 2-1 uh, on a little bitty ground ball that basically rolled down the first base line. They come in and grab the ball. He turns a throw to first, and there's nobody covering first base, so the kid throws it away. So Florida scores. They end up winning that game 2-1. But yeah, and then so we, fast forward a year, so the kids show up at a missions game and they get honored. They show up at a Spurs game, they get honored. There's half a dozen different parades in San Antonio and or Bernie that they got asked to participate in. So the kids are now local celebrities. I mean, we can't go anywhere in Texas without people knowing who Caleb is, and they're like, oh yeah, we watch you on TV. So I mean, it's he still signs autographs to this day. It's kind of crazy. But what we noticed, he still watches all those YouTube videos of all the games that ESPN would have the entire broadcast. But what we noticed back in the fall was that those YouTube videos were starting to go away. They weren't I guess they weren't paying to keep them online. And so all you can see now is, if you go search for it, is like there's some guys that have built some like 12 to 15 minute sort of highlight reels of the games. So for me, I was like, well, this was obviously a historic moment. We want Caleb to be able to share this moment with his kids and grandkids and whatnot. So I decided I was just going to write a book because I wanted to put all this down on paper. So over the holidays, this past Christmas, I wrote the book. I sat down, like I said, it probably took me about 5 weeks in total. Put the whole thing together, and really kind of, like I said, I really wanted to model it a little bit off of Moneyball, because it's kind of the same story, right? It's Bernie had had some really good high school baseball players that have gone on to either be drafted or play in college, but we had never had a little league team ever do anything like this. And so, kind of like the Oakland A's in the book Moneyball, how do you take a group of kids that nobody's ever heard of and turn them into conference champions or world champions or whatever? So that's kind of the approach that I took with the books. I share a bunch of the backstory of each of the kids, of how they were developed and what they're doing from an athletic perspective to get ready for this. And then I also talk about the metrics for what the boys actually accomplished. So just to give you some perspective, obviously, for all of us that are baseball nerds, Caleb's in-season average, like I said, during the Little League regular season was 595, and he threw 68% strike percentage. I talk in the book, Nolan Ryan's lifetime strike percentage was 65%. And so we obviously, and you can argue that in the MLB, like they do want to throw competitive balls. For us, we try to throw 70% strike percentage or greater. And so the way that we've always used Little League is we say, Caleb, in Little League, obviously, because most of the kids aren't that great of hitters, we want you to throw 100% strikes. So whenever he would pitch in a Little League game, his goal is to throw 100% strikes. And whenever he would pitch in a select game, our goal was to still throw 65 to 70% strikes. Um, but so that really helped us. And like I said, over the course of, he didn't really start pitching until he's 9, but really over the course of from him being 9 through now, his strike percentage is now fantastic. And actually, here just a few weeks ago, he was in Houston at the PG Perfect Game All-State event. He was the best pitcher out of 144 pitchers. That there were all other, that were all 13-year-old majors players that showed up for that weekend tournament. So his baseball skill has gotten fantastic. As a team, our batting average for our 12 kids that batted in that continuous batting order, like I talked about, our team batting average was 414. That it's just absolutely phenomenal. Like, you look at a bunch of these teams now, and they're lucky to have a team batting average of 350, 320. Ours being over 400 means that we just, like, again, we were just a rock star group. Julian, who was our star pitcher and big hitter, his average was 622 for the Little League World Series run. Caleb's um, OBP was 395, but he was number 2 on our team in quality at bats. So, like I said, he's definitely not the power hitter. We had eight kids that hit home runs throughout the course of that series. Caleb was never going to hit a home run with one of those USA bats, but he was hitting line drives in the gap. He was putting ground balls in play, moving runners over, taking walks, taking hits, getting hit by pitch, whatever he needed to do. To help the team win. And so he ended up being number 2 in QAB. And so when you've got your quote unquote weakest kid that's got a 395 OBP and your best player has got a 622 batting average, it's going to be a crazy good offensive year. And so that's what we experienced. We had 23 home runs as a team over those 19 games. Interestingly enough, and this is one thing I harp on the kids all the time, we took 23 hit by pitches. One of the quickest ways to get me fired up is to have a kid duck out of the way of a pitch. You need to turn your shoulder and let that pitch hit you, and you need to get on first base and take one for the team, because so many times you'll duck out of the way of that pitch and then you'll strike out and you just completely wasted that at bat because you could have gotten on base. And so it's interesting that those two numbers aligned. This is just some of our global statistics, obviously. So we had 371 batters that we faced. We only allowed 56 hits. We only walked 41 kids, so slightly more than 10%, and we struck out 163 of them. So just about a little over a 50% strikeout rate. Our ERA was 1.978 as a team for the entire 19 games, and as a team, we threw 64.25% strike percentage. So again, like I said, that 65% is kind of our bottom end goal, and we'd love to be north of that. We were super close to that, but we did a really, really good job pitching. Out of the 92 innings that we played, we had 60 of them where we didn't walk any kids. And so that's just a phenomenal testament to our pitchers as well. We already talked about the Florida's 23 prior trips. Texas, like I said, now been there, not, well, it was 28 when we got, or 27 when we got there. Now it's been 31, and we still need to bring home a championship. On the hitting side of the equation, we had 564 plate appearances. We had 191 hits ourselves. 72 times we got walked. So you can see, obviously, we got walked, more than 10% as well. We did have 86 strikeouts. So obviously, there are some things that we could have done better as well. And we had 33 strikeouts looking. So even as good as we were, there's definitely some, baseball, right? There's always opportunity to improve, no matter how good you are. And so there's definitely some opportunity for our kids to continue to develop their baseball IQ. But yeah, our run totals for the 19 games, we outscored our opponents 195 to 34, and so it was just crazy the summer that we put up. And then team quality at bat average was 55.5%. Like I said, Caleb's was the second highest on the team at 65.12. So that just gives you, again, a really good knowledge of the depth of our 12 kids, and just how good that squad was that we put together. I just share this, and then we'll open it up for questions here in just a second. There's a Facebook reporter that was doing posts the whole time in Little League, or the whole time in Williamsport, and really through regionals as well. His most popular post, the one that got like 3 million views, was this one that he did about Caleb. So Caleb got brought into pitch in the U.S. Championship game against Florida. He had pitched outstanding against Nevada that Wednesday. He threw 78% strike percentage, got his first strikeout, like I said, and then got a fly ball out to end the inning and kept us in it. And then we won that game. He gets brought into pitch in that Florida game. Didn't pitch quite as well. We had a number of errors in that game. If you guys want to read the play-by-play, it's in the book, and you can see how many errors we had in that final game. But that was this guy's most liked post, and so that was really cool that it just happened to be of Caleb. And then so we talk about kind of like the Moneyball story, or American Underdog. It was an underdog story, right? Like Bernie came out of nowhere. Nobody knew who we were. We ultimately dominated really, really well all the way up to the very almost to the very end. But then we also had the underdog story within the story, which is also Caleb being the 11-year-old playing on this team and still doing really, really well. And then I put this graphic in there. Yeah, that baseball game is simply a nervous breakdown divided into nine innings. Well, in this case, it was 6, but I joke in the book, but it's really the truth. Like, we kept gnawing our fingernails off every single game, every single pitch, because you're just on the edge of your seat, hoping and praying that the kids play up to their potential. And what you find out about baseball, and probably just about any athletic sport, is you put kids in a very, very high pressure situation like this, and it's almost never going to happen where they play above their average. If you're lucky, they will play at their average. A lot of times they will play a little bit worse than they normally play, just because of the added pressure that exists. And so in order to get a squad to do really, really well in this type of situation, means they've got to be fantastic before they actually get there. And then that way they don't even have to play their best and they can still win. And so that was kind of some of the statistics that I put into the book, as far as what the metrics were that we measured our kids against. And with that, I will be happy to open it up for questions. And I appreciate you guys' attention.
Yeah, this is terrific, Tim. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I do want to open it up to questions. So anybody like to jump in, feel free to unmute yourself and toss your question Tim's way.
Tim, this is Dick Butler. Pleasure to meet you. I look forward to meeting you face to face. I understand that we're going to be on a panel together at the Burnie Book Festival, so I look forward to that. But my question to you is, as an author, when did you touched on it a little bit, but when did you decide to write the book? It sounds like it wasn't until after the Little League World Series that you decided you were going to put together the book, or did you make notes during the course of the season and then that developed into a book, or how did that come about?
That's a good question. So I have written two prior business books. Um, I I guess I probably had the idea of writing a book like shortly after we got back, but sort of like life happens, right? You get busy and you don't think about it. So really, the impetus for me, and I've had a I've had a book going ever since Caleb was a baby. That basically, it's titled "For the Love of Caleb," but it basically it's been a book about his life. Just because, obviously, for those of us that are older, um, we remember certain things about our childhood, but we don't remember nearly all of the stuff that happened, right? So I wanted to have an actual book that Caleb could read and be like, holy crap, here's all the things that happened in 18 years that I forgot 80% of it, right? But so I've had that going ever since he was a baby. But so when this, like I said, the impetus for this was really, it was probably that October of, that would have been 2025. Like I said, those YouTube videos were starting to go away because literally, I mean, Caleb probably once a week would watch those YouTube games on his phone or on the TV or on the iPad or whatever, and we'd always be talking about them. Um, and and so he's like, "Hey, Dad," one day he told me, he's like, "Hey, Dad, I'm looking for this the game and I can't find it." So we searched together, we couldn't find it. So then that kind of really sparked me. I mean, the nice thing is, I don't know if you guys, if you still got kids or grandkids that that play any baseball, but there's an app now called Game Changer that's literally a play-by-play of the games, and so we had the full Game Changer record of our whole summer. So that was incredibly helpful for me just to have obviously the play-by-play. But then the first 160 pages of the book. So that's I put the play-by-play in the appendix, and then I put the first 160 pages is really it's the development of the kids. How did we form the team? Sort of the highlight reel of how we got to Williamsport, and then what are we also focused on as parents, for our kids, because obviously, several of them have dreams of playing in college and MLB or whatever. So the back couple of chapters are, more about the kids, and then also what are we focused on for high school and college. So I wrote all that basically that, from, I guess, from memory or from scratch. Caleb helped a whole lot because obviously I didn't have some of the detail of like inside the compound because I never got to go in there. I did obviously solicit some help from the other parents as well. So some of them chimed in with some commentary and some, hey, don't forget about this and that kind of thing. So it was, I mean, just like anything else, it takes a small village to have a book come together. I had an advanced reader group in Bernie that was really helpful. So I put out a couple of early versions. They gave me some feedback on certain things they liked, certain things they didn't like. So I kind of refined it that way. And then ultimately, like I said, but really kind of drafted the whole thing over that 5 weeks of Christmas. I would say middle of January, I kind of released version one. The advanced reader group, gave me a bunch of feedback. Probably got, most of that finalized by the end of February, early March. And then we technically published it, like April or whatever.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So,
thanks.
so fairly quick, but yeah, I mean, like I said, so for and my first couple of books, the first book I wrote probably took me 6 months to write. My second book that I wrote, I think it took me 2 months. So it's kind of like, I think just like anything else, right? Once you do it a couple times, you get better at it. And it's also, I'll tell anybody that if they haven't written a book and they're thinking about writing a book, all you have, if you have a love and a passion for doing something or talking about something, that will be what forces the issue, and you'll get it done. So yeah, like I said, it was absolutely just, I was throwing up on the paper in front of my computer when I was writing stuff down, right? And it almost came at me faster than I could write it down, but it came together really quickly.
Good.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Hey, Tim, thanks for sharing. So is Caleb, what are Caleb's, if any, professional baseball ambitions?
We're we're very focused on giving him options. So he was the quarterback of his football team in 7th grade. We just found out yesterday he's going to be the quarterback again this year for 8th grade football. He runs cross country. He actually ran a 2-mile race this morning. He plays golf at a very high level. He's a single digit handicap. He plays basketball in the winter. He runs track in the spring. He made the tennis team last year in 7th grade as well. So we fund and focus his efforts on all of that, because ultimately, we'd love him to be like a Michael Jordan to Barry Bonds, right, where he can be a multi-sport athlete as long as possible. He'll tell you baseball, but like I said, he's still undersized. He was 4'11", 92 pounds at the Little League World Series. He's now 5'3", 125. But he's going to be probably 6'2" to 6'4", probably 180 to 220. So we just said, if you hit 6'4", basketball becomes a legitimate opportunity for you, right? Like if you're 6'2", then and I mean, obviously baseball would be fine too, but he's still figuring that out. What he loves whatever he's playing at the time, but I would say we definitely, we devote more time to baseball than we do any of the other sports. But I'm trying to keep his skill level with the other sports to a level where at least he can play them if he chooses to do so. And what we've been told in high school is, obviously he'll probably make, depending on how he grows to with puberty, he can make any of the JV squads for probably baseball and or football. As a freshman, he could probably make the varsity golf team. So like I said, we just want him to be able to play as much as he can play, as long as he can play it. And then we'll let the chips fall where they may once puberty's over and done with. And he has 5 years of strength conditioning, which, we've already been working on for the last year.
Thanks. Interesting.
Hey, Tim, I know a team in Houston. I saw that his favorite team was the Houston Astros. That's a team that could use some help, I think, both on the pitching side and the fielding side and the contact side. So just putting it out there.
The problem with the Astros, right? I mean, really, I hate to say it, but a whole lot of the MLB teams these days is, other than the Dodgers, nobody wants to pay for talent, right? I mean, the Astros had invested really, really well from like 2013 through 2023 in their farm system. So like, we all remember like when Correa came up, he was a superstar within literally like 6 months of being called up to the show, right? But now they've gotten rid of a lot of that feeder system as well, and then they've de-invested, and so it seems like and especially now, right now, we've got the obviously the contract negotiation going on, but every single MLB team is not investing in paying for superstars. Astros, obviously, we lost Kyle Tucker, and we because they didn't want to pay him. And so because they always thought, well, we've, our next level superstar at the Space Cowboys, we can easily call them up and they can play in the show. Right. So, yeah, I'm frustrated with the MLB as a whole. We read articles all the time about the Angels, owner. He's like, my attendees, they want $5 beer and $3 hot dogs, and they don't give a shit if we win or not, right? So it's just if we're not there to win, what the hell are we doing? But yeah, they're all multi-billion-dollar organizations. So, and it's kind of like the Cowboys too, right? I mean, I'm a Cowboys fan, but as long as Jerry Jones is there, I don't know that we're ever going to have a winning season. And and we keep hiring these freaking quarterbacks that we pay them a shitload of money before they produce. It's like, no, we'll pay you a shitload of money after you produce, not before you produce. But it's just backwards in the professional ranks, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, Tim, I was going to ask you about you alluded to this during your presentation about the mental health aspect, because it seems like it's a lot of pressure on professional athletes, to perform at the highest level in the most important games, at the most important moments, on the biggest stages that they'll ever play. And then when we sort of put that on 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds, I'm just wondering if you could talk a little more about, the effort that's put in to try to maintain a healthy mental attitude for all of these young people, that are faced with all these expectations. I'm sure, some parents put unrealistic expectations on their kids. There's peer pressure, there's coaches, there's all these things. So do you feel like enough is being done in Little League and in youth sports to try to adjust that? Is that something that's better known today, would you say, as opposed to past years?
I think it's starting to be recognized. I would say that I definitely would say that not enough is being done because and I've had to do a whole lot of study in order to understand what it is I need to know. That way I can coach Caleb and develop him the way that I want to, right? So I've probably read, I don't even know, 15 or 20 or 25 different, youth development, baseball books, etc. I listen to podcasts all the time when we've got windshield time driving to different practices or whatever else. But I think where we've landed with Caleb is we we first give him obviously his identity completely apart from anything athletic, right? Like, you are a child of God, you are incredibly valuable, loved member of our family. You are a fantastic student. You are a great, friend to a lot of your friends. He's an only child, so he's not a sibling. But we give him that, and then we say we obviously are going to work really really hard to do good, to be excellent at everything that we do. But we also recognize that in every athletic pursuit there is a high level of failure that exists, and frankly you don't get really really good at anything until you failed a ton. And so I think the problem that I see a lot of parents have is they put unrealistic expectations on their kids, but they haven't put in the development work to help them get there. Because like I said, I don't even know the number anymore, but it's like I said, it's literally it's 10 to 20 hours worth of work every single week, week in, week out, that we've done since he was 5 years old for him to be an excellent athlete. And so you see other these other parents are like, oh yeah, I take my kids to his little league game and his practice once a week, and then they go see a coach for an hour a week, and they think that that's the extent of what they need to do. And it's like, guys, you're barely scratching the surface. And so, and then you see it in the production, right? So like, and I can look at the metrics and I can watch these kids, play in the games today. Once you get to the point where you see, like, how does Caleb approach when he's in the box? How does he pitch? How does he move? How does his body function? You can also compare that to all these other kids, and you see the kids that step out of the box, the kids that are pulling their head, the kids that they do 100 different little things wrong, which shows them they do not have the level of development that would allow them to bat 450 for the Little League World Series, right? And so I'm not, I'm never going to say, hey, slam the kid. That that is a developmental gap that literally would have taken them the last 3 or 4 years to work on developing. And the challenge you see too is, some of these kids that get exposed, right? Like I said, we had 5 pitchers that could throw over 70 miles an hour. If you're not hitting 70-mile-an-hour pitching at 11, you're never going to hit it at 12 years old. You need to be working on that stuff well in advance. And so most of these parents, haven't had their kids go hit that elite level of pitching, because that's scary. You watch a 70-mile-an-hour pitch come in there. Caleb's been hit by a 74-mile-an-hour pitch because he took it on his shoulder the way he was supposed to. But like, until you experience that and then do that repetitively, like literally hundreds of times, you don't have a chance in heck of batting 450 against that style of pitching, right? And so that's the developmental gap that exists. But yeah, I think from the mental health side, it is a big deal, because there's a guy in Bernie, Jeremy Afelt, who's a 3-time Giants World Series champion. He owns Free Roam Brewery. He wrote a book called Built for the Storm, and it's a whole book about his mental health struggles with, when he was winning those World Series, and the divorce that he went through, and some of the times that he felt inadequate, and other stuff. So it's absolutely a very real thing. I've actually been there's a different I forget the guy's name now, but there's a different big leaguer. They've got a whole program that they talk about, the mental health side of baseball and how to help kids just relax and be in the moment and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think, like I said, for us, we always, Caleb, we are proud of you regardless of how you perform. Like, your performance does not have any impact on how much I love you, or how valuable you are to us as family. We expect failure, but we're going to work our butts off to try to achieve excellence, right? And so that's the way that's the way that we talk about it day in and day out. That's the way that we reinforce it. We celebrate success, obviously, with milkshakes and other stuff. And then when we fail, we talk, we do a post-mortem. We say, let's learn from it, and then let's go focus in on those areas that we failed at so we can get better. Little League is a great example. So in Little League, the strike zone is from the armpits to the knees. In select and obviously regular baseball, it's from the bottom of the sternum down. So there's a gap of about, this far in Little League that's a strike at the top of the zone. Well, that's a really hard pitch to hit if you can put the ball there. And so it takes a whole lot of practice to be able to stay with a level swing and turn your shoulders right through that ball. We've practiced that swing for 3 years. And finally, just now here in probably the last 12 to 18 months, every now and again, Caleb will get a high pitch there and he'll stay balanced and he'll go through it and he'll lance it. It'll be a rip shot line drive to the outfield. But it's been 3 or 4 years worth of work to finally get him to be able to perform for that particular style pitch, right? And we have to do the same thing. We had to practice middle out fastballs. We had to practice middle out low fastballs that he could stay behind it and take it oppo to try to hit it to the right center gap. And so it's all these little things that you got to work on. And there's so many things that you have to do right in baseball that what we do is we have a whole different measurement program that we use for Caleb. So it's, did you do the right? And we talk about it in the book too, is you have to define what excellence is, right? So like in golf, an easy example, excellence would be 1 stroke per hole for 18 holes. So you'd shoot 18. Well, that's never happened in the history of around the golf, right? But so when you think about baseball, like if you define excellence in baseball, what would that mean? It means every single time you're on the pitching, you're throwing a strike to whatever target you're trying to get to, or if you're batting, you're trying to execute the right decision in that moment. So if it's a ball, you're going to let it go. If it's a strike and you've got runners on third and second with no outs, you're going to try to hit that ball on the ground to the right side to score that run. So we have a whole measurement thing that we've set up with Caleb where, did you execute the right decision for that particular situation on every single pitch? And if you did, we celebrate that regardless of what the heck happened, right? If you didn't, then we use that as a postmortem and a diagnostic to learn from it. But so that's how we work to develop his baseball IQ. But it has helped. I mean, he's in honors math classes at school. He's an analytics kid. He loves to look at game changer statistics and stuff. So he really gets this whole side of it. But it's also helped him to get better. But he monitors himself, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like I said, he went to that July tournament in Houston, and he competed his butt off because he really wants to make one of these national Texas teams that are going to play in November. And he ended up being the first pitcher out of that whole group of 144, and he was just over the moon excited. But you should have seen him on the mound both those times that he pitched. He was locked in, he was focused, and every single time that he got called a ball that he thought was an outer edge strike, he was sort of like grimacing and jumping up and down because he was like, "Come on, like that was a strike." Like I know that zone pretty well, so it's But yeah, no, I mean, I think, hopefully he's, outside of baseball, he runs around, wants to play tag, wants to be silly. So I think hopefully he's very mentally balanced. We obviously, like I said, we work on, the academic side of stuff too, and just help him to be an overall very balanced kid, from kind of the 7 life pillars. So, you'll have to ask me in 10 years if I did a good job or not, right? Because right now we're in the middle of it. So
Yeah.
I may fail miserably. We'll have to see.
No, I appreciate it very much. I love the well-roundedness approach that you have. And, just like working on the physical mechanics, there's also the mental stuff that it sounds like you address in the postmortem and, try to get, kind of a reasonable response, to something that happens regularly in sports, and that is failure. And how do you, sometimes you have to flush it, sometimes you just have to process it, sometimes you have to look at it as an opportunity to get better. But I really appreciate that. Let me just open it up one last time. Is there anyone else that has a question? I want to congratulate Tim for his book and for sharing this with us, and good luck to his son every step of the way, no matter what he decides to do. But is it, anyone else want to ask one last question of our fellow member and book author, Tim here? Anybody? Don, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious what you see has happened going from 60 to 90 feet this year.
That's a great question. It's just like anything else. I always say, like, and I tell Caleb this all the time, if you ever encounter something in any athletic activity that's new to you that we have not practiced, then I failed. You should see it in practice 100 times before you ever see it in a game. So we played on 60-90 fields when he was 11. We would go play up in some other tournaments just for the exposure and the experience. What's really interesting about the 60-90 jump too is when they go from 13 to 14, they go from USSSA bats to BB Corps bats, which if you're a bat guy, you know that they have less pop. So it's actually been fantastic for Caleb. And actually the July event was a good example of that. I told him in advance, I said, Bud, because he's a really accurate pitcher, right? Like I said, I mean, he averages 65, 68% strike percentage. He typically walks maybe one kid per game when he pitches a whole game, throws 65 or 70 pitches. He would have some kids that occasionally, they were some big kids that, they would get a hold of it with those USSSA bats. They'd hit a home run on him. I said, Bud, as soon as those kids have to hit BB Corps bats, those are now long fly balls. So his ERA there in Houston was 0.00. He allowed 3 hits in 16 batters and like 5 strikeouts, and everything else was either a ground ball or fly out. And so we were very excited to get there. Obviously, it's affected him too. He's been able to hit a few home runs at the different age groups. He can hit the ball. He can hit the ball with that USSSA bat. He can probably hit that ball about 280. But with the BB Corps bat, he's hitting it. He's back to probably 250, 260. But because we've always been focused on being a line drive hitter and a very solid contact line drive hitter, he's leapfrogged a lot of our peers, right? Because these kids, they're a little more erratic at the plate. They're not as disciplined. They're a little more off center with their hits, so they're getting a lot more ground balls. They're getting a lot more flyouts. He's already been practicing line drives for 5 years now, so he's already squaring up the baseball, even with that BB Corps bat, hitting little line drives. They're going out, they're going past the infielders. They're hitting them in the gaps. Every now and again, he's going to hit one to an outfielder, and he's going to get caught. But no, he's executing really, really well with that jump. And I think again, it was just but it's you need to be preparing for that for 2 years. That way, when they make that jump, it's actually not that big of a deal. It should be a non-event. But again, what that requires is pre-planning and focus and 2 years worth of development to be prepared for that moment. Versus, oh yeah, well, we know the kids are going to have to jump to this at 14, because we do see a lot of kids that struggle. They'll struggle with the pitching side of things because it's an extra 10 feet that they've got to throw the ball, so they're throwing a lot more balls than they're used to. Their breaking balls are acting differently. Obviously, with 10 more feet, they've got to throw it, so the release point's a little different. So there are adjustments that have to be made in and as we all know, in any athletic activity, you can't make adjustments overnight and expect excellence. So again, we've been preparing for these adjustments for 2 years, and now we're there full time, and all of these adjustments and preparation that we've been doing are starting to pay off. And he's seeing fantastic results way faster than just about everybody else we play with, just because I think we've had the forethought to try to, to get here.
Hey, Tim, thank you so much. One last thing I'll ask. We definitely are going to promote the Bernie event that you and Dick Butler are going to be involved in October. We'll let our members know about that. What's the best way for members to get your book? I did share the Amazon link. Is that the best way, or are there other ways to get your book?
I mean, if you're out on the Northwest side at all, the Dale's bookstore there in Bernie actually carries it. The D-Bat in Bernie carries it, which is the batting cages, and then the D-Bat there on Tezel carries it as well. One of the guys that's an instructor there, oh God, I'm gonna blank on his name, Mark. We've gone to Mark for pitching forever. He loves Caleb to death. And he was like, hey, we want to sell it here in our store. So yeah, those 2 different D-Bats have it. The Dale's Bookshop there on Main Street in the Richter building in Bernie has it. If you want to, shop local, or obviously, like I said, you can get it on Amazon. And it's in the SABR library as well. If you just want to read the online version, but if you want a hard copy, then obviously you'll have to find figure out where you want to get it from.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure hearing about your book and about your son's journey, but your journey also. And we're thrilled to have you in our chapter. And thanks so much for joining us to share all of this with us. We really appreciate it.
No, well, like I said, I definitely appreciate you guys' time, and definitely look forward to getting to meet everybody in person. And yeah, like I said, I would definitely, you guys are all, a lot of y'all are a whole lot further down the road with authorship than I am. So any constructive criticism on the book, I would welcome. So, don't be shy. You're not going to hurt my feelings.
Yeah. We're in the process of doing our planning for our winter meeting, which is in San Marcos, which is closer to San Antonio than Austin is. I teach at Texas State University, so we have long met there for our winter meeting. So Tim, I'll just let you know that that's going to be Saturday, January 9th. We haven't announced that to everybody, but we're going to be in this August newsletter. But Saturday, Saturday, January 9th, in San Marcos, I invite you to come take part, to be a participant. And if you want to bring some books along, we might get a chance to have you sign the book, and you might be able to make a few book sales. I just offer that if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. I spoke at the Houston chapter, whatever that was. We actually, it was like we did a Space Cowboys event there at Constellation Field. So I took some books with me and sold a few over there. So yeah, definitely happy to bring some. And like I said, look forward to participating in the chapter over the next several years.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording now. And then what we're going to do is